It is important to note that somebody who says they are a certified something does not mean that they are qualified to provide you with therapy. A certified life coach, for example, is not the same thing as a licensed professional counselor.
What the hell?
Does that mean you can't still get a crappy LPC, licensed professional counselor? There's the first one. Of course not. There is no battery or test of courses that somebody can take that will automatically ensure that they are a wise, experienced, and mean you well type of human being.
Ah, damn it!
But there are things you can look for that increase your chances. Alphabet soup time. Here's a few of the things that you want to be looking for. First off, there's licensed. So most of the time, those are going to simply start with an L. Pretty straightforward. But you have things like LPC, LMFT, and LSW, which are licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, or licensed social worker, respectively. Sometimes you will actually find a doctor in there as well. But if it's not a doctorate in counseling or psychiatry, you need to pull away because that person didn't know enough to not mislabel themselves. You are not ethically or by law allowed to advertise yourself as a doctor unless it's in the discipline that you've achieved that doctorate in. So if I have a doctorate in theology, for example, I can't list myself as a doctor on my counseling business cards. That doesn't mean I can't hang it on my wall, though. Now, in addition to LPC, LMFT, and LSW, there can be a PsyD or a PhD, but we'll get to that. The PsyD is a psychiatric. And now I interrupt myself because I made a mistake. The PsyD is not interchangeable. I'm not quite sure how I made that mistake, but there's so many of these letters that's what happens to even people who are professionals in the field. A PsyD is only belonging to a psychologist. A psychiatrist is always a medical doctor first and then specializes in psychiatry. They are just doctor, an MD. Like being at the top of the scale isn't good enough. Doctor or a doctorate in psychology, and they too are able to provide what you're actually probably looking for. And a PhD, unlike the PsyD, also can be a doctorate in psychology, but it means that they focus in a different area. It probably isn't going to matter to you a whole lot if it does. I suggest you just kind of Google it. PsyD versus PhD in psychology. But there are also PNP or PNHNP. Now, the PNP stands for Psychiatric Nurse Practitioner, and the other one is Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioner. The PNP and the PMHNP are basically the same thing, but they could also be a doctor, in which case they would have doctor on there. And if that's not confusing, I don't know what is. But what you should do is just ask them. They will be happy to explain to you and tell you that where they're at on there. No, they won't be. They fucking hate it. I mean, they will tell you, but if they're not a doctor already, they'll be annoyed because they have to explain why they're not a doctor. And if they are a doctor, they'll be annoyed because they have to explain again why they are a doctor, but aren't adding it onto the middle of their things becoming, say, DPNP. And in fairness, of course, that is yet one more of the alphabet soup to remember. A DPNP is going to be a doctorate of psychiatric nurse practitioning because education. Or DPMHNP. Who hasn't made a few choice career errors? So your LSWs, LMFTs, and LPCs are all talk therapy versions. Psychiatrists and PNPs can prescribe. Psychologists can sometimes prescribe. Basically, they are doctors, but they alone also don't have a master's level equivalent anywhere. So that's why they're PsyDs and not like licensed, etc. They have to become licensed doctors and go through all sorts of things. And then they can't prescribe except where they can, which is in 5 states, Louisiana, New Mexico, Illinois, Idaho, and Iowa. It's a growing movement, though. Maybe they'll be able to prescribe for you soon. Basically, if you want to talk, you don't go to your PNP or psychiatrist and expect them to spend too much time on you. They'll basically go through with you long enough to get some history, figure out what a good organic mental health diagnosis on you might be, so they can apply the right medication for what ails you. Doesn't mean you can't find an exception to that in terms of talk therapy, but you can either expect to pay for it an awful lot or be very grateful because they just don't come up very often. So all of the above require licenses. But that's not the same as a certification. Licenses are acquired from a state board and is therefore regulated. The licenses are things that require you to have a certain amount of education and potentially certifications under your belt. Certifications are from independent agencies out in the world, and therefore, if you're not familiar with them at all, they might be a little bit sus. So certifications indicate a specialty, generally speaking, after licensure. It means that a therapist has done specialized studies and or training in the area that they're claiming certification in. There's all kinds of certification. I don't want to hit all of them. You'd simply have to ask or look them up. The best one that I know of, the most common one, is a CAC or a CADC. CAC is a certified addictions counselor and a CADC is certified alcohol and drug counselor. Again, basically the same thing, different by state. That means that they have specialized training and experience in working with people who are struggling with addictions. A good thing to look for if that's a problem facing you.
This is taking forever.
Now, just because your therapist doesn't have a certain certification behind their name does not mean they cannot help you. It could simply mean that they have the experience but never bothered to pay the money necessary to get the certification, or they may not know it. Your best bet is to literally just ask. Lots of times they can refer onward to people who do have the right sort of thing, or thanks to me, you can now look for the right sorts of certifications yourself. Also, Google what might work out best for you. What is a certified addictions counselor in my state? Who is licensed? I recommend going to Psychology Today and getting that checked into.
You're almost done?
Yeah.
What you do need to watch for is the people who are attempting to misrepresent what they can do or inflate it. If somebody's guaranteeing results from therapy, or if they're making huge claims about how your life is going to change and be better as a result, you need to be very cautious. It's unlikely one person out of the thousands and thousands of people who have tons of education and experience and are in networks and are sharing what's functioning for their clients are going to have missed the one therapy that somebody's promising is going to fix all of your woes.